Right now, there is a nation with like a completely decimated military, a totally ruined economy, and a recently killed supreme leader that is somehow, against all logic, holding the entire global economy hostage. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's one of the most counterintuitive geopolitical situations we've seen in modern history. You have this massive, glaring asymmetry between the actual physical destruction on the ground and their strategic leverage on the global stage.
And that's exactly the puzzle we are unpacking for you today because we're looking at the chaotic, real-time fallout of this 40-day war involving the U.S., Israel, and Iran exactly as it stands right now in April 2026.
Right.
To really cut through the fog of war here, we are pulling together on the ground, reporting and analysis from Tuitrai, Online, One News, and New Long.
Which is so crucial right now because that fog is incredibly thick. I mean, for over a month, you've had a coordinated U.S. and Israeli military campaign that has just relentlessly pounded Iran.
Yeah, it's been intense.
It has. And the reports are pretty definitive. Iran's military infrastructure is basically decimated. Their strategic sites are largely in ruins. And yet, if you look at the global markets today, the world is completely paralyzed.
So our mission today is to kind of show you the hidden wiring of this whole crisis. We want to look at how a regional conflict, 8,000 miles away, sends these massive shockwaves that disrupt historic diplomatic talks, fracture Western alliances, and ultimately drive up the literal price you are paying at the grocery store and the gas pump.
Absolutely. And to see that wiring, we actually need to start at the physical epicenter of the panic.
Okay.
We'll have to look at the waters of the Middle East, specifically the Strait of Hormuz.
Right, the absolute choke point. Because the U.S. has blockaded Iranian ports, and in direct retaliation to that, Iran has announced the complete closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And for you listening, just to put the sheer scale of this into perspective, the strait is essentially the jugular vein of the global energy market. Like 1/5 of the entire world's oil travels through this incredibly narrow stretch of water.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's basically like closing the main artery of a major metropolitan city during rush hour, but, for global energy.
That's a great way to put it. And the real-world chaos stemming from this is just staggering. I mean, the sources detail the timeline of just one day, April 18th.
Right. The reports from Neolaug and Twitter, they paint a really intense picture of that day. There were at least 3 attacks on commercial vessels in a single 24-hour period.
Yeah, just nonstop.
You had an unidentified object hit a cargo ship about 25 nautical miles off the coast of Oman, which severely damaged its containers. And then you have actual speedboats, specifically belonging to Iran's Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC actively firing on a tanker.
Which is leaving thousands of commercial ships totally stranded. I mean, the sources noted that about 10 ships tried to cross near Larak Island.
Oh, wow, 10 ships.
Yeah, about 10. And that area is heavily monitored by the IRGC, so almost all of them just turned right back around.
But, I'm kind of stuck on the mechanics of this. Like, how does a country actually close international waters? It's not like you could just build a concrete wall across the ocean, right? I mean, it's open water.
Well, what's fascinating here is how naval experts actually define a blockade in the modern era. Jennifer Parker, she's a naval expert from the University of New South Wales. She offered this really brilliant analysis on this.
Oh, what does she say?
She points out that the strait is never entirely open or closed in a literal physical sense. It's really about what military strategists call a threat wall.
Wait, a threat wall? How does an invisible wall actually stop a massive cargo ship?
It all comes down to the actuaries. Like when a shipping company assesses risk, they aren't looking at a physical barrier. They're looking at the maritime insurance market.
Oh, of course. Money.
Exactly. If there is a credible risk of sea mines or, IRGC speedboats firing warning shots, the insurance premiums just skyrocket overnight.
So the math basically stops making sense for them.
Precisely. The premium to literally just sail through that strait becomes higher than the potential profit of the cargo itself. So the shipping companies just outright refuse to sail. The threat itself becomes this impenetrable barrier.
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect mechanical sense. But it also seems like Iran's own leadership is deeply confused about this wall right now.
How do you mean?
Well, according to the reports, Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araki, is out there publicly claiming that the strait is completely open to civilian ships.
Right.
But almost simultaneously, the IRGC military wing is signaling these severe restrictions and, actually firing on tankers. Why would they deliberately look so disorganized on the world stage?
Yeah, it looks messy. But Parker's analysis points to two very distinct and very different possibilities here. The first is that this contradiction is actually a deliberate strategy.
A strategy.
Yeah. By sending mixed signals, you create paralyzing ambiguity. The shipping companies can't assess the risk accurately, so they just default to the safest option, which is not sailing at all.
Oh, I see. So Iran effectively achieves the closure without having to officially declare a hot war on global shipping.
Exactly. They get all the economic leverage without the total diplomatic fallout.
That's incredibly sneaky, but what's the second possibility?
The second possibility is much more volatile. It suggests a deep, dangerous rift within Iran itself.
Like a civil divide.
Yeah, a total disconnect between the political leaders who are trying to manage international diplomacy and the military hardliners in the IRGC, who are essentially operating as a rogue entity at this point.
Man, which brings us perfectly to the diplomatic side of this crisis, because the chaos at the Strait of Hormuz isn't just some random military tactic. It is basically Iran's primary bargaining chip at the negotiating table right now.
Oh, absolutely. It is the ultimate trump card in these historic face-to-face talks happening in Islamabad between the U.S. and Iran.
And those talks are being mediated by Pakistan's army commander, right?
Right.
And I mean, the stakes couldn't be higher. On one side, you have the U.S., led by President Donald Trump, demanding a total end to Iran's nuclear program and a complete cessation of their support for proxy militant groups across the Middle East.
Right. Clear U.S. demands. But on the other side, Iran is flat out refusing to compromise. They are actually making maximalist demands.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they want to continue uranium enrichment, which is literally the very thing the U.S. went to war to stop, and they're demanding the immediate lifting of the U.S. maritime blockade.
Okay, this is where I really have to pause because the logic here just feels completely upside down to me.
It does seem that way.
Like, we just established that Iran's military has been pounded for 40 days, their infrastructure is in ruins, and crucially, their 86-year-old supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed in the strikes.
Correct.
By any traditional metric, a country in that position should be begging for a truce. How do they possibly have the arrogance to make maximalist demands right now?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really forces us to redefine what national power actually looks like today. Iran's leverage isn't in its conventional military strength.
Right.
They know they can't match the U.S. or Israel jet for jet. Their power lies entirely in their ability to disrupt the globe asymmetrically.
Oh, you mean the threat wall in the strait we were just talking about?
Exactly. They are holding the global economy hostage, basically betting that the U.S. and its allies cannot sustain the prolonged domestic economic damage of, $120 a barrel oil.
But what about the internal vacuum in Iran? Khamenei is dead. Doesn't losing your head of state usually trigger a total regime collapse?
You would definitely think so, but the intelligence suggests his death might actually be doing the exact opposite.
Wait, really? How?
It's creating this volatile vacuum that the most extreme hardliners are now aggressively filling. There is a massive internal push right now to install his son, Mojtaba Khamenei, as the new supreme leader.
Okay, and what's his deal?
Well, Mojtaba is widely considered to be even more radical and uncompromising than his father was.
Oh, wow. So the military strikes may have just accidentally cleared the path for the absolute most extreme voices to take total control.
Yes, that's a very real possibility. And for those hardliners, compromising with the U.S. right now wouldn't just be seen as a military concession. It would be viewed as weakness at home. It's basically political suicide for them.
Right?
So they are leveraging that global economic fear to ensure their own political survival and consolidate their power.
It's just a terrifying game of chicken. And while these leaders sit in some secure room in Islamabad playing this macro-level game of geopolitical chess, the actual pieces on the board, like the neighboring countries in the Middle East, are being blown to pieces.
Yeah, the collateral damage is immense.
Because the negotiations haven't stopped the localized violence at all.
And not even a little bit.
Yeah.
The proxy wars are still raging, completely out of control. If you look at Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is facing a severe political crisis right now.
Yeah, the One News analysis really highlighted that. Because he hasn't achieved his primary stated goals. The Iranian nuclear threat isn't neutralized, and the proxy groups haven't been stopped.
Right, even though he's going on television claiming that Iran is, quote, weaker than ever.
But the reality on the ground tells a very different story, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Mhm.
Every day, Israelis are just exhausted. I mean, for 40 days, they lived under the constant threat of air raid sirens, scrambling into bomb shelters around the clock.
That's got to take a massive toll.
It does. Societal fatigue on that scale quickly turns into a massive political liability, especially with upcoming elections on the horizon for him.
And the situation right next door in Lebanon is incredibly confusing too, because we have this 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, which was brokered in Washington.
Right.
But both the U.S. and Israel are adamant that this truce does not include Hezbollah. How does that even work?
It's complicated.
It sounds like a landlord fighting a tenant, and all the innocent neighbors in the building are just getting their windows smashed in.
Yeah, that analogy is painfully accurate. It really highlights the fatal flaw in traditional diplomacy when you're dealing with these modern proxy networks. A state-to-state ceasefire with the Lebanese government in Beirut literally means nothing to Hezbollah.
Right, because Hezbollah isn't the Lebanese government.
Exactly. They operate as a state within a state. They have their own completely independent command structure, their own massive arsenal, and their own strategic goals.
So the paper the government signs doesn't bind them.
You can sign all the papers you want with Lebanon, but Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem explicitly warned that the truce cannot be one-sided. He stated his fighters' fingers are still on the triggers and they will retaliate against any Israeli strikes.
Which means the sirens in Israel just keep going off, the shelters stay full, and Netanyahu's political survival remains deeply in question.
Absolutely.
If the Israeli public goes to the polls and feels like 40 days of war didn't yield real security, that's a massive problem for him. And, it's not just Israel and Lebanon caught in this crossfire either.
No, the Gulf Arab states, who really begged to stay out of this whole thing, are getting dragged right in.
Yeah, because neutrality is almost impossible to maintain when you are sitting in the geographic blast radius. Iranian missiles and drones have hit energy sites all across the region.
And you have countries like the United Arab Emirates absolutely furious over the aggression. Meanwhile, Oman, which literally shares the Strait of Hormuz with Iran, is desperately trying to mediate because they are right on the firing line.
It's just a mess. But the blast radius isn't just geographic, it's economic, and it wraps around the entire globe. Because the instability from this specific conflict is fracturing Western alliances and really emboldening bad actors everywhere.
That's the reality of the interconnectedness of the modern world. A local war is never truly local anymore. Just look at NATO.
Yeah, the alliance is under unprecedented strain right now. The One News report highlighted this heavily. President Trump is reportedly furious with NATO allies, specifically Spain and France, because they unilaterally restricted their airspace and the use of joint military facilities for U.S. forces that were conducting operations against Iran.
It's a fundamental clash of priorities. I mean, from the perspective of Spain and France, they are sovereign nations trying to balance their alliance obligations with their own domestic politics and a desperate desire to contain the conflict.
They just don't want to be dragged into a wider regional war.
Exactly. But from the U.S. perspective, when your forces are actively engaged, restricting airspace is viewed as a deep betrayal.
And Trump really did not hold back. He publicly called NATO a paper tiger and even went as far as comparing the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer to Neville Chamberlain.
Wow.
Yeah, which, historically speaking, is about the most loaded, insulting comparison you can possibly make regarding appeasement.
It's a severe diplomatic rupture. And here's the real danger. When the world's most formidable military alliance starts fighting with itself, a massive power vacuum is created. Other nations notice that distraction and they actively capitalize on it.
Like North Korea.
Yes.
While the U.S. is completely consumed by what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz, North Korea just casually fired its 7th batch of ballistic missiles this year near Sinpo, which is a major submarine base for them.
And furthermore, the UN's nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, with its director Rafael Grossi, they just reported that North Korea is actively accelerating its uranium enrichment and building new facilities.
Oh, man.
Yeah, they were moving fast because they know the global policeman is tied up on the other side of the world.
And that total lack of global bandwidth, it just creates this atmospheric instability that seems to ripple everywhere. Our sources also mentioned a horrific, mysterious shooting in Kyiv.
Right, the supermarket incident.
Yeah, a gunman opened fire in a supermarket, took hostages, and 6 people were left dead after special forces intervened. Now, obviously, there isn't a direct line connecting the Iranian military to a lone gunman in Ukraine.
No, of course not.
But it really speaks to this overarching reality when the big stabilizing systems of the world are distracted and frayed at the edges. Local chaos and instability just seem to spike.
It creates a climate where opportunistic actors feel emboldened. But, as far-reaching as these geopolitical shifts are, we really have to look at the immediate domestic impact as well.
Yes, because it's easy to look at a map and think, oh, a conflict 8,000 miles away won't affect me. But this is the exact moment where foreign policy literally becomes a tax on the American consumer.
The economic data is just uncompromising right now. Because of that threat wall in the Strait of Hormuz, the global benchmark for oil prices, Brent crude spiked to $119 a barrel.
Which translates directly to the pump. U.S. gas prices jumped from under $3 to $4.15 a gallon almost overnight.
Right. And the cascading effect of that is what really damages the broader economy. Well, when diesel and gas go up, the cost to transport every single piece of merchandise goes up. That cost gets passed directly to the buyer, which drives up inflation. In March alone, U.S. inflation hit 3.3%.
Oh.
And that's the highest it has been since May of 2024.
And the timing of this collision between geopolitics and domestic politics couldn't be more critical. The U.S. is barreling toward midterm elections. High inflation and a massive spike at the gas pump. I mean, that is an absolute political nightmare for whichever party is in power.
It's a fundamental truth of electoral politics.
Yeah.
Objectively speaking, these economic indicators are creating a severe headwind for President Trump and the Republican Party heading into November.
Yeah, the initial domestic promises of curbing inflation are being completely undermined by a maritime choke point half a world away.
Exactly. Which means the Iranian negotiators in Pakistan know exactly what the U.S. electoral calendar looks like.
Oh, they're totally watching the clock.
They absolutely are. They are betting that the U.S. voter will eventually demand an end to the conflict just to bring gas prices down, effectively forcing the U.S. to concede.
It is a masterclass in asymmetric leverage.
Truly.
Okay, let's take a breath and synthesize everything we've covered today, because we have traced an incredibly complex web here.
We really have.
We've seen how a few speedboats and the threat of sea mines in a narrow, 21-mile-wide strait can dictate the terms at a high-stakes negotiating table in Islamabad. We've seen how that same choke point can expose the brutal reality of proxy wars in Israel and Lebanon, fracture the historic NATO alliance in Europe, and ultimately reach right into your wallet by driving up the cost of living for everyday Americans.
It paints a picture of a deeply unsettled world where our traditional definitions of power and leverage are being aggressively rewritten.
Which leaves me with a final lingering question. Something for you listening to mull over today as you go about your business.
Okay.
If a battered nation with its military infrastructure in ruins and its economy devastated can still hold the entire global market hostage simply by threatening a small stretch of water, are our traditional measures of military supremacy becoming completely obsolete in the modern, hyper-connected world?
I mean, if a trillion-dollar air force can't prevent your domestic economy from stalling due to a localized maritime threat, then we truly have to rethink what it means to be a superpower.
It really makes you wonder if we're all still playing by the rules of a game that no longer exists. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We threw a massive amount of complex information at you today, but congratulations, you are now officially the most well-informed person in the room on one of the most critical crises of our time. Keep asking questions, keep looking past the obvious, and we'll see you on the next Deep Dive.